Welcome to part 2 of The Shadow Warrior. So let's take apart this story for a little bit so we can understand its significance and its meaning. The first question I have for you is that what part did you come into the story? Because everybody's representation of what the village looks like, or the necklace looks like, or what the people look like is all up to you. So what part did it captivate you? When did you come in? What was the words that got your attention? And see, the story began in this village where all these men had these necklaces, and this represents the masculinity, the royalty, the graciousness, the gentleness that we are as men. And this one man was very regal, and he stood erect, and he went about his day doing what it was that he was doing, and he ignored what the other men said about him, that the whispers that they have. And isn't that just the way it is, that we ignore the whispers that we hear about ourselves, that we just forget what they say? And then the next part of this story is that the man wants to be accepted by others, and he stands outside to look in. And isn't that the way of adolescence? Isn't that what we want as young? There's nothing worse than teenagers. You're not the right clothes and not the right family. You don't live in the right place, and you begin to take on these projections, these belief systems. And then the story continues. And what happens is that each man betrays him and says to him that the necklaces that they all wore, that they said something, the ultimate betrayal, a spiritual betrayal, and says they said something in a way that was of a prayer, and then they threw that part of themselves away. And that's the part that we actually give away. There's that part of us that if we don't get it back, that we're going to emotionally die. And in some cases, there are many men that are among the walking dead. And this is the part that's kidnapped, because you give it away willingly. I love somebody so much that I gave away my power. But the good news is you can reclaim it. And then the story continues, and what he hears is this whisper coming out from this one area. And usually what would happen is we ignore it. For many years, how many years has it been for you that you're ignoring it? And there's a part of ourselves that we call the shadow part. It's the part that we repress or deny or fear. We don't want to look at that part, but it gets in our way. And then we go against our intuitiveness. We know that there's something that's quite not right, but we ignore it and we continue on. But in this case, he did something different. He decided to do something and take action. And he went into that part, not knowing what was going to happen, but he went in there. And then as he went down deep, deep, deep below, and he looked out to the distance, he saw an old man. And that's the inner sage, our inner wisdom, that's talking to us. And he said to lick his wounds. You see, these are the wounds. This is the deep work that we have to do, that we have to go in there and face these things that we call the shadows, the part of ourselves that we don't like, that we don't want to do anything about, but they show up. For some men, they show up as violent. For some men, they show up as passive-aggressive, but they show up. And this man decides to do the work, to do his soul work. And as he licks one wound, as he begins to work on one wound, the miracle that happens is that the other wounds begin to heal. And then he sees himself as this man begins to show up in a whole new way. Because once again, they hear the forest demon, and the forest demons come in. This is that shadow part that I'm talking about. But now, he knows what that is. And he has this shield that's in front of him. He gets behind it. This is that inner sage, that inner wisdom that knows how to combat it, because he's already done this deep, soulful work. And then that forest demon just keeps on going. That spirit goes by. That shadow part just leaves because it doesn't have a place to stay anymore. And then when he comes out, he has a new necklace and a new robe. And that's the way it is when we do this kind of work. And he looks inside and sees himself in the reflection of the river. He actually sees the essence side. And that's what happens when we do something, because people will look at you and say, I don't know what you've done, what workshop you went to, or what book you read, what seminar, but there's something different about you. And that's what happens when you do this deep work. When this deep work happens, change happens. And then these other men show up, and they look at him and said, I don't know what you got, but I want some of that. I want that change too. So he points to the place where he went, And these men go there for all the wrong reason. And see, when you go down to do this work for all the wrong reason, the shadow just gobbles you up until you decide to do something different, until you have a decision to face that shadow. And that's what happens in this story. And that ends this part of the story. And now there's one part left for me to share with you. So go on to that, and I'll talk to you more about the Shadow Warrior.